Go back into South Bend's history. 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, and what do you see? You see groups of people working to bring change to this city. They had different ideas of what that change should be. They didn't always agree. Yet, in every decade, there were groups of people for whom positive change was their life's work. This podcast, South Bend's Own Words, features the voices of people who helped make the city change. We'll share clips from the oral histories done by the Indiana University South Bend Civil Rights Heritage Center that tell a more complete history of the city. It's the story of many cultures, not just one. It's the story of South Bend. In 1952, then 3-year-old Ralph Miles moved to South Bend. An uncle told his father that the Bendix company was hiring. Ralph's special needs school gave him work well beyond his grade level. Later, he left that school to attend Harrison and then Washington. The work was on grade level and way too easy for him. Bored and without appropriate emotional and learning spaces, he acted out. By the time he got to Washington High School, he turned to violence, particularly to combat racist white students. Eventually, he was expelled for bringing a gun into school. Ralph did not have a positive opinion of local black leaders or black organizations. He saw cronyism, colorism, and too much compliance with white people in power at the expense of people in his West Side community. In 2003, Civil Rights Heritage Center historian David Healey sat down to talk with Ralph Miles. They discussed Ralph's early years in his special needs school, his perspective as a disaffected high school student, and his critiques of South Bend's black elite. Before the interview starts, it's worth noting that both David and Ralph use words like normal and regular to describe Ralph's first school, the one for students with special needs. I would not use those words, as they set a rigid and unacceptable definition of normal and pits those that differ as somehow irregular or abnormal.
Today is September the 23rd. I am interviewing Mr. Ralph Miles at his residence here in South Bend. My name is David Healey. Okay, Mr. Mills, are you a native of South Bend?
No, I came to South Bend when I was about 3.
And where did your parents come from?
Well, we originally came from Memphis, Tennessee. My father was from a little town in Mississippi, but my mother was from Memphis, Tennessee. And we came up here when I was about 3.
Where did your parents live when you first came to South Bend?
We stayed over on Monroe Street. We stayed in my uncle's house down in the basement.
Okay.
And I remember every time it rained, we float in little boats that we made out of popsicle sticks and stuff like that. And it was fun because back then, it was like something to do because they had a long tunnel down in the basement. The only thing I didn't like about it, though, it had a lot of rats in there because when it rained, you could see the rats swimming in the water and everything, and our mother would sit up at night sometimes to keep the rats from getting to us. That's when my father couldn't get a job because he left the hospital where he worked at in Memphis to come up here to get a job because my uncle had said that Bendix was hiring at the time. And when he did come up here, he wasn't able to get a job at Bendix right away, so he had to take some other jobs, and that's where he went into construction and things of that nature.
Do you remember the year he got a job at Bendix?
Let's see, we moved up here when I was 3, so I was born in 49, so I would have been around about 52. We probably moved up here around about 53 or 54.
Okay. Where did you go to school at?
The first school I attended was E.M. Morris, which was a private school for handicapped individuals. And I remember going there, and when they tested me at first, they tested me for kindergarten, And they didn't put me in kindergarten. They started me in the higher grade. They started me running around about in the 5th grade because I was doing high school work. By the time I was really supposed to be in the 5th grade, I was able to do high school work. But yeah, I remember Morris very well. And that was a nice school because, you know, they set taxi cabs for us to pick us up. And if we didn't have a taxi cab available, then Mr. Rackman's father would send their limousine to pick us up. So we rode to school in limousines or either in taxi cabs.
Was it an interracial school?
Oh yeah. But you have to have a handicap in order to go there.
Were your teachers all white at that school?
The teacher was white, but Mrs. Stein and her assistants were black. Those were the cooks.
When you left there, did you go to high school right from there?
No, I left Ian Morris School because I wanted to be like normal kids. And I kept asking my mother to let me go to school to be like a normal child. So she let me go to Harrison.
Okay, you went to Harrison, and they put you back a grade.
Right. I think that's what really made me lose interest in school. Because when they put me back, the work was so easy. I didn't remember just sitting around and think of things to do to get in trouble.
This is at Harrison.
Mm-hmm.
And this would be in the late 50s?
Yeah.
There were no black teachers at Harrison at that time.
Yeah, there was.
There was.
There was Mr. Dixon. He was one of the black teachers there. Because Mr. Dixon was more like in charge of disciplinary. Like if a child was really bad, then you would go to Mr. Dixon's room. And that's where you would stay at all day. That was almost like being in jail. Because he had a little red paddle that he called the Board of Education. And if you messed up, then you would meet the Board of Education. Because I remember him getting me a couple times, you know, and I mean, he would ask you, do you want a machine gun or do you want the shotgun? And the machine gun, he just hit you real fast, and the shotgun, he just hit you real slow and let it wait, and, you know, it kind of sting. And he would get you for walking on the grass or running in the hallway or something like that. Because when we was going to school, if you talked back to a teacher, you got in trouble. And you better not hit one because you're going to boys' school. So I remember this one gentleman, he did hit the teacher, Mr. Stafford. He was a history teacher. And him and, Pruny Pope got to fighting in the hallway. And they sent Pruny Pope to the boys' school for 6 months for hitting the teacher.
So when you left Harrison, what high school did you go to?
Then we went to Washington.
Washington.
Mm-hmm.
And what was your experience like at Washington?
Well, that's when I kept getting into fights. You know, because that's when it was like every spring it was tradition for the whites and the blacks to go and fight. So we would just roam the halls of school looking for somebody to fight. And I remember it was a group of white boys called Prominence.
Prominence?
Prominence.
Prominence.
And
club?
Yeah, down there was a family. It was about maybe 5 or 6 of them.
Oh.
And they were notorious, you know, because, you know, we used to always be fighting with them, and that's when we started bringing knives and guns to school because they caught me with weapons in school. They kicked me out and told them that I was not fit to be in any school in the state of Indiana, that I was incorrigible, that I need to be locked up. So that's when I went outside that one day, got into a fight with some people that was the day that was riding out there, and I broke this policeman's jaw.
I'm looking at your arrest record here. This was on January 21st, 1969.
Right.
And this assault occurred, actually the assault occurred on October 31st, 68. This was at the school?
Yeah, out to Washington High School. And me and Earl Richardson were the only 2 people that was arrested that time.
And you mentioned this was like a spring...
it was a spring tradition.
A spring tradition that the white students, the black students would get into fights at Washington.
Yeah.
So when did you graduate from high school?
I didn't.
You did not graduate?
No, they kicked me out of school because for carrying a weapon. And...
What kind of weapon was it?
A gun.
A gun. Why did you bring it to school?
Well, because I wanted to be bad, And, you know, I stole this man's 38 out of his house, and I'm walking around with a 38.
So this would be in the 60s.
Yeah.
60s time. What was it like for an African American to be living in South Bend in the early 60s?
It was really difficult because you had to fight the blacks that wanted to keep you down, and you had to fight the whites that wanted to keep you down.
Question. The blacks that wanted to keep you down?
Oh, yes. There was a lot of blacks that wanted to keep you down. They didn't want you to rise above their status in life because they were making a good living by going on there telling the folks downtown that they were the one that can control everything. That there was a problem in the black neighborhood, come to me and I'll be able to handle it for you. You don't have to, you don't have to do nothing, just bring it to me. There was a lot of blacks that sold their color a long time ago.
I've never heard that before. You actually had blacks that more or less, I guess, traitors.
Yeah, very true.
That's part of what you're talking about here then.
Yeah, very true. If you was light-skinned, had good hair, and everything, then yeah, you was accepted to work right next to the white folks. But if you was black, dark black with kinky hair or whatever, then you stayed in the background. You know, it used to be a little joke they used to say, if you're half white, you're all right, but if you're black, you stay back. So there was a dark-skinned blacks that didn't have a lot. If you had money, then you could step to the forefront.
Up to the 60s. This is during the Civil Rights era.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of changes occurred in South Bend during that time. There was marches. And, what did you think, as a young man, what did you think about the NAACP and the Urban League? Do you think they were doing enough at the time?
The Urban League was more or less into like a social atmosphere, you know, and if you came from, say, a family that didn't have a lot of money, or your father didn't have a good job or something like that, or he was not into politics, they kind of shunned you. But the Urban League was more or less like a little social clique. They were more concerned about wine and sip dinners and cheese dinners than the problem that actually faced the black community, because a lot of money that was going to the Urban League was misappropriated. And a lot of people that was supposed to be getting help for their houses getting fixed up, or helping them with transportation to get back and forth to a job, it wasn't being done. It was just a lot of abuse of the funds. And the girls that was working at the Urban League was like, if you didn't go with the director at the time, then you didn't work there that very long.
So there was some sexual harassment, so to speak, going on?
A lot of it.
A lot of that. What about the NAACP?
I joined the NAACP because I thought I wanted to make a change and, you know, fight for the right causes and everything, but that was just a farce, you know, because they really didn't want to tackle the tough issues. It was more like, you can have a voice, but don't speak too loud. So a lot of things that was going on, especially with the youth, when we didn't have no place to go, they wouldn't tackle those issues. But if it was something that was safe for them to tackle, they would tackle it.
Was there, I've heard this from many African Americans, that there were certain areas of South Bend, ghetto areas, that if you came to South Bend, this is the area you were shown, and you weren't shown any homes anywhere else.
Yeah, that's true. Because there was, Alonzo Watson was the grocer back then. Mm-hmm. And a lot of black folks did not really care that much for Mr. Watson, because he didn't really make an effort to show you houses in the white sections of town. But that was because he had to make a living for his family. And why waste his time showing you a house in an all-white neighborhood where he'd know the chances of you getting that house was very slim? So I can understand why he did show you, but he did honestly try to show you the best houses in the black area. He didn't show you the raggediest ones, but he did what he could do, because only recently, and that was back in the 80s, later part of the 80s, that housing really opened up to any great degree here. But it's, even to this day, there are still some places that blacks cannot live.
Really? Where would that be?
Some of your upper suburbs, you have to pay twice as much to live there. There are some all-white suburbs that exist right now that they got covenants on that says you cannot sell your house to anyone that has an ethnic background. It has to be white or something like that. There's several places like that that didn't exist.
That brings up another interesting subject. When I look at civil rights history in the South, you will see black churches took a major lead. Not all black churches. A very small group of black churches took the lead because many of them didn't want to participate because they were afraid of what would happen to them.
Retaliation.
Yes. But here in South Bend, I don't see, at least no one's brought to my attention, any particular roles that black churches played in the civil rights movement.
They didn't really. The different ministers was afraid because they used to come to us and tell us, hey, y'all go home, you shouldn't be out here doing all this, is wrong. And we were telling the ministers, get out of our face. We didn't have no respect for them because they wasn't out there helping us. They would sit up in the pulpit and talk about us on Sunday, and we wouldn't see them again until next Sunday. As long as their families was eating and their kids was going to school wearing decent clothes, they didn't care what happened.
So they come out sort of like to pacify you, but they weren't really taking a leadership role. That's what
they were there trying to tell us not to fight, don't burn, don't do this. You're gonna get a record, you're gonna get killed. And at the time, we just, we don't care about dying. We didn't have nothing. We didn't have nothing, no entertainment, no nothing. So we just, if they can't have it, they won't have it.
South Bend's Own Words was created by Kevin Tidmarsh and me, George Garner. This episode was produced by Juitu Pangani from the Ernestine M. Racklin School of the Arts at IU South Bend, and by me through the Civil Rights Heritage Center. Visit us and learn how IU South Bend students inspired the transformation of a once segregated South Bend swimming pool. We give guided tours and offer public events that show how the history of oppression echoes through the city today. See and hear more history, plan your visit, or share your thoughts about this episode, all at crhc.iusb.edu.